Caverns is the second full-length album from Meridion, a Chilean death metal band who have they've changed their style a little bit between the first and second album. And I think if you know the pedigree of this band or kind of where they came from, some of the main actors in here are from bands like Dominus Zoll, a very long-running, important Chilean band for a certain type of death metal, and Trimegisto, which is kind of a different thing, but also fairly traditional in its kind of atmospheric death metal approach. And I think their approach in this band is similar to sort of like the more dissonant side of Morbid Angel, as well as the exaggerations of that we find in a band like Portal. And I think that was a lot more abstract on their first album. When Rise from the South came out in 2018, I don't think a lot of people caught on with it right away. I think that it was on a smaller label, and I didn't pick it up and review it until 2019 when it had come out on CD. So it was an impressive thing. It was had a lot of guitar effects and vocal effects on it. It was kind of swamped in its sound. It was very dissonant and unpredictable. It was an exciting record to listen to. It was very surreal, but it still had a classic feeling to it of atmospheric death metal. And they sort of shifted gears quite a bit for this second album. And rather than dive into it right away, we'll just cut into a clip here, and you'll pretty immediately see some new things if you're familiar, or hear some new things if you're familiar with the first album. Now, if you're familiar with the sort of keyboard integrated side of Eternal Dirge on their second album, Chaos Magic, this isn't quite that level of keyboard integration into death metal, but it does approach that. It's also not exactly the typical Nocturnus style approach to it either. There are times where the keyboards accentuate a riff or help with a melody to work out in a slow way on more of a doom metal side thing, or a riff or something like that. But this isn't kind of a typical incorporation of that style. So what we get here is an album that is decidedly mid-paced and doesn't quite work up to the amount of speed as the first album did, and that's for the sake of a different record, and one that has a different atmosphere, a different pace, and a different sound, which is at once sort of a layered, almost science fiction feeling to start, and the one that becomes kind of unreal and of its own vibe as it moves on. So the thing to say about this record is that I think it's meant to be more hypnotic, a little bit easier to read, and more focused around simpler grooves. And maybe that won't be enough for someone who wanted something exactly like the first album, but over the course of the full listen, you will find those more complex and dissonant pieces later on as the sort of story, as it were, progresses. So there's more to it than meets the eye. It is sort of a dark, ritualistic, psychedelic feeling death metal album to start, and it has its own kind of vibe to it, thanks to, again, like the vocal effects and a lot more layers this time around to the production values. It is a much stronger production value than the first record, which is kind of scratchy and buried a lot of the bass here and there. But here, everything is a little bit clearer, and it just seems like they've tooled around and found a sound that is decidedly different from the first record, but still has the same voice as that first record. So I think if you're a fan of Incantation and Immolation, that's a start. Definitely if you're a fan of Morbid Angel, of a more sludgy era, there is that heavier feeling and more of a mid-paced style here. But Meridian bring their own touch to everything, and I think they did a pretty good job producing a very different second album, and not just the same thing twice. So for me, that's a high recommendation, kind of verging on a moderately high recommendation. I don't think this is a death metal record for everyone, but it is an above average result from a band who are developing their own style in interesting ways. And I think this was a worthwhile kind of experiment and a thing to depict here. It's a dark and intense death metal record that was to my taste in particular. So check that out if that's your to your taste or interest, and you can read more of my review on the site and get all the details, or you can just go listen to it by yourself. It is up and out everywhere now.